Okay. Welcome everybody. I'm just waiting for a few more people to drop in as we before I start doing the official welcome. Please let us know in the chat who you are, where you work, what your job is. Put the sticky up. Good to see you here, Sarah. We'll kick off. Hi, Leon. Kick off in a minute or so. There's Jocelyn. A guy called Nick Feresh that you might have heard of. Right, so I think let's respect everyone's time. Our experience is some people, quite a lot of people will still drop in the first 10 minutes of a webinar. But a very warm welcome, everyone, to this week's CFO South Africa webinar. Very excited to have you here. Today we're talking about employee benefits and more specifically about the trends in retirement funding. The role finance teams have to play here specifically. My name is Joel. I'm the Managing Director of CFO South Africa, and with me are two of my great friends from Sanlam, Viresh Maharaj, Managing Executive from Sanlam Corporates in the distribution side, and Jocelyn Hathaway, the CFO of Sanlam Corporates. I put a sticky up, a note saying, please say hi in the chat and let us know your job title and which organization you work for. It's always nice to know who's in the room. It's very important for CFO South Africa that you know that this is your webinar. So please, as Viresh and Jocelyn present, please ask as many questions as you can think of. We'll try to address them all now, and if we can't, our fantastic team is jotting all the questions down and making sure that Sanlam gets an opportunity to get that answer to you afterwards. As part of the registration process, we also already asked you what are your most pressing concerns about employee benefits right now, and we received some great responses. Marius Simon was commenting on the lack of growth in investment values for both employees and pensioners at the moment. Tumeda Tladi was worrying about employers who simply can't afford the benefits right now. And Ellen Gibbon was asking actually about the administration cost of pausing the benefits during COVID-19. So please ask more questions. We'll get to them after the presentation. I'm also quickly going to put a poll up. And I'm going to ask you to all make a quick choice. Let's see, I've published it now. The way your finance team views the role of retirement funds has changed. And the options are not at all, significantly while COVID-19 lasts, or forever because of COVID-19. We'll chat about the outcome of that poll later, but I'm going to hand over to Viresh and Jocelyn. Viresh was the project leader for an incredible piece of benchmark research that Sanlam does, and it's obviously specifically interesting now in this COVID-19 year. So it was only launched yesterday to a select audience, so we've got a real scoop here. Just to let you know, there's no need to take screenshots of his presentation. After this webinar, you'll receive an email with the link to the replay video and the whole benchmark report that has all this information in it. So I'm going to click this slide away, and Jocelyn and Viresh, let's just quickly hear from you. Jocelyn today is battling to get a camera going. So, but I thought it would be a good idea, Viresh, before you warm us with all the new data, to hear from Jocelyn, just from a CFO perspective, from a finance perspective. When a benchmark report like this comes out about retirement funds, what do you look out for? But we may have lost Jocelyn Ferreira. So I think what we should do rather is to start the presentation, and we'll park that question for Jocelyn a bit later, and we'll get her back on in a minute or two.
Okay, well, thank you, John. I'm going to move over to the slides then, and I'm going to kick off. So hopefully, yes, there we go. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We do appreciate your time. And this is a topic that Jocelyn and I are quite passionate about, not just because of the fact that we work in this industry, but because we genuinely believe that structuring a suite of employee benefits optimally can make a meaningful difference in the lives of individuals across the country. And the more inclusive we are in doing so, we're actually able to scale the reach of the employee benefits industry to have as big an impact on as many employees in a sustainable manner as possible. So a little bit about the benchmark research itself. In 1981, Sanlam started conducting the research back then predominantly amongst what were known as defined benefit funds. Over time, this research has followed the ebbs and flows of the retirement funding industry in South Africa, with a focus on occupational retirement funds, and has monitored the shift from defined benefits to defined contribution, and the significant consolidation from what are known as standalone or privately administered funds into what are regarded as umbrella funds currently. And through this period of just about 40-ish years, the Sanlam benchmark research has been conducting an exploration of the experiences and quantitative analysis of retirement funds, not just of Sanlam clients, but across the breadth of South Africa's retirement funding industry, in order to provide stakeholders with objective data and insights to help them to make better financial decisions. Hopefully, the data that we're able to share with you today can help to inform and influence your view of retirement funding and employee benefits into the future. Now, the traditional research that we've conducted has focused on various aspects of retirement funds that were contextual at those times. For instance, over the last couple of years, we've focused on the impact of the default regulations that were introduced last year. Now, the obvious elephant in the room this year is the impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic. Hence, we then decided to poll professional employee benefits consultants, as well as retirement funds and employers, to understand their experiences of the lockdown and the pandemic, as well as to get a sense of their expectations of the future. So what I'm about to present to you represents a snapshot of that research, and much more is available. And Joe will be sending through our insights book later on today, as well as a link through to the Sanlam Benchmark Symposium itself, where you can have full access to the breadth of the content provided. So moving on to the research itself, what we found is that an overarching theme, or one of the key themes emerging from the research, is that it's now all about the individual. And what we mean by this is that the focus of institutional retirement funding is shifting towards engaging individuals themselves in a very real manner. It's about individualizing the member's experience of institutional retirement funding. Now, there are a number of data points that allow us to infer this. When we asked the professional employee benefits consultants, and I'll refer to them as consultants from now on, to identify their top emerging trends over the next 5 to 10 years in the industry, you see the spread of responses in front of you. Now, this was based on a sample of 100 employee benefits consultants, and technological innovation was very much the top ranking item. But thereafter, we've got member focus, an integrated suite of benefits, as well as flexibility of benefit design. Now, these taken together all point towards unlocking value for individuals through the appropriate design of employee benefits that speak to them as individuals. Going a bit further, we asked them to identify their current advice trends at that point in time. Now, bearing in mind that this particular aspect of the survey was conducted pre-COVID, these may have changed, but the costs of benefits and services ranked quite highly, but the member focus emerges once again due to the provision of financial advice ranking second, and more time being dedicated to member education ranking fifth. And keeping in mind that there is a long tail of responses, and I've just demonstrated the top 5 on screen in front of you. Now that represented their views at that current time. We then asked them at that point in time to indicate, well, how is advice changing? And as you can see, these are the top 4 ranking items, again, with a long tail of the lower ranking items behind this. But the top 4 highest ranking items all point in a singular direction, and that is engaging members themselves. Everything I've presented to you, and there's a lot more to it, was conducted before the impact of the pandemic and the lockdown. And I don't think I've got to spend too much time to touch on the fact that this has changed our country, it's changed the globe, it's changed our lives immeasurably. So how has it changed the financial situation of our employees, as well as the view of the role that retirement funds can play? Now, effectively, according to Stats South Africa, South Africans and employees are under a significant amount of pressure. I don't have to read through the bullets in front of you. You can cast your eye over them yourselves. But I do want to stop and pause on the final 2 bullets. 12% of South Africans, according to Stats SA, are concerned about the short-term impact of COVID on their personal financial situation, and 2/3 of South Africans are concerned about the long-term impact of COVID-19 on their particular financial situation. Now, this lends itself to the view that South Africans are under a significant amount of financial stress, not just in the short term, but anticipate a prolonged impact on their personal finances as the effects of the lockdown in the economy play themselves out. Through the All Told COVID-19 survey, which you see on the right-hand side of your screens, this group has polled South Africans to understand various factors, including their fears on certain aspects. The columns that you see reflect the value of the polls on certain fears regarding economic collapse, the loss of earnings, and lawlessness. And each of those bars per item reflects a view for a particular week after lockdown. And so when you look at those bars, you see the fear of economic collapse increased over time and waned off a little bit as the lockdown started easing up. The fear of loss of earnings ramped up significantly and had plateaued quite strongly as the lockdown progressed, as well as fears regarding lawlessness. So the net effect of this is that South Africans are afraid, and they've got a range of fears, and when it comes to their personal financial situation, those fears are real and have played themselves out in lived experience of members themselves. So we then, during the lockdown, conducted a survey amongst 140 professional employee benefits consultants and 230 retirement funds and employers. Now, for the consultants themselves, we must stop and just add a little bit of focus here. A professional employee benefits consultant would have a number of clients, at least a good half dozen or so, if not much more than that. And so their views are the aggregate views based on their experience of their particular set of clients. So even though it reflects the views of just 140 consultants, please bear in mind that those 140 consultants, between them, probably service at least 1,000 employers and retirement funds. And this is their views, or these are their views. In black, you've got the responses of the consultants, and in blue, those of the funds and employers themselves. And it seems that the predominant member behavior experienced during this time, as reported by the participants, were queries from members on complaints on their investment performance and or their fund values. Now, bearing in mind that when we conducted the survey about a month and a half ago, this was on the back end of the market crash that we experienced due to the pandemic globally and in South Africa itself, which would obviously have a severe knock-on effect on asset values. Thankfully, we have seen a rebound in that, and hopefully not too many people cashed out their values at the exact wrong time. Retirement funds and employers are obviously not insulated by the impact of COVID-19 and the lockdown and personal finances. And we therefore received, as Sanlam, a number of requests to temporarily suspend retirement fund contributions of employers and employees. in order to provide a means of financial relief at a stage in time. To put this differently, if you temporarily suspend your retirement fund contributions and the average contribution is, say, call it 15% a month, that no longer gets paid through to your retirement fund, and the employees themselves then get the net value of that as additional cash flow for a SUPPO for a temporary period. And when we tested the views of employers and funds as to which were the most appropriate mechanisms to provide financial relief through to employees during the lockdown, a temporary suspension was the highest ranking item. And what we found is that at that stage in time, 26% of employers and 9 in 10 consultants had already either suspended contributions or had at least a client that had done so. And given the lag between when we conducted the survey and to our current reality, we would fully expect that those figures have increased. Included in the survey were hypothetical measures. You see the measures I mentioned just now. On those suspensions, what we find is that the average or the most popular duration of that temporary suspension is around 3 months, with 6 or more months being the next most popular, but probably indicative of the great uncertainty that surrounds the return to normality and to business as usual. We would fully anticipate that many of these suspensions, particularly the shorter-term suspensions, will be rolled over in time, given that the economic recovery in South Africa is going to be prolonged and the return to normal is going to take far longer than I think most of us would want. So a question could be raised, well, how does this affect retirement funding? So firstly, if you take a 6-month suspension of contributions, we've modeled the impact on the final fund value based on a range of conservative assumptions. But the net effect of a 6-month suspension in contributions ranges between 1% to 3% of the final fund value, which is not material against the pressing current need for survival and the immediate cash flow relief that suspending retirement fund contributions provides to affected employees. We also looked at the actual value of such relief and what difference that makes in employees' lives. So based on average, on Sanlam's own administration data, based on average fund contributions, as well as average tax rates, as well as the average salaries, and bearing in mind that when it comes to averages, you've got to take them with a pinch of salt and apply your minds to the interpretation of them. What we find is that the net increase in pay due to a suspended retirement funding contribution on average is around 1,500 Rand per month per employee, which, when taken relative to the government's special COVID relief of 350 Rand to unemployed persons, provides a relative view of the impact that 1,500 Rand can make on an employed person relative to the 350 Rand to an unemployed person. And so we believe that it's still a meaningful amount of income for the majority of South Africans and can make a meaningful difference in their lives, especially when they're under financial distress as a result of the lockdown itself. Now, the question, or the big elephant in the room, and there are a number of different elephants in the room, unfortunately, but one of the big elephants in the room here is, once you've uncorked this bottle, how do you put the cork back in? How do you then implement retirement fund contributions once you've suspended them and employees have become accustomed to using that additional cash flow to fund their lifestyle needs? And when we say lifestyle needs, that those could be very relevant basic needs that they otherwise could not afford without the relief provided by the suspension, especially against some of the increases we've seen across the country, with food prices in particular being in focus. So that's a forthcoming attraction that we'll have to deal with as and when employers actually roll back these suspensions. So when we looked at the reactions of members when such fund contributions have been suspended, an interesting figure just stands out, and that is the most commonly reported reaction of members to the suspension has been gratitude towards the employer, reported by employers and funds themselves. And this is of little surprise because, as I have mentioned just now, the suspension could provide a lifeline, especially at a point in time when families are struggling to make ends meet, especially for those who are still lucky enough to have an income, let alone those who have experienced a reduction in income during this period. According to the FSCA, our regulator, any such suspensions would need to be communicated 30 days in advance to all members so that they were aware of the suspensions and could query them if needed. And what we found is that while a significant majority of consultants, retirement funds, and employers believed that the majority of their members were aware of the suspensions, a significant minority did not have confidence that this was the case. Especially with the draft conduct standards that have been tabled just a few weeks ago by the FSCA, we believe that this would need to change. A practical issue that we face in the retirement funding industry is access to adequate contact detail in order to engage members themselves. Now, in line with the trend of individualization that I mentioned earlier, the fact that in all likelihood, retirement funds would need to obtain and maintain and provide the type of information you see on screen in front of you on an ongoing basis when paying contributions to their administrators means that administrators and service providers, obviously subject to the provisions of the POPI Act, would be able to engage and contact members and inform them of various aspects of their retirement funding in a responsible manner, provided that they actually have the details to do so. An issue affecting retirement funds has been a dramatic increase in insurance prices over a number of years. And before the lockdown, a significant minority of consultants indicated that they believed that risk pricing had stabilized. Now, the dual impact of the healthcare impact of the lockdown as well as economic impact of the lockdown, we would anticipate that group risk prices will increase into the future. For those who are familiar with the industry, it's typically one-year term contracts, annually renewable, with increases or decreases or prices staying the same on an annual basis. I see Jocelyn's managed to join us on the camera. Everyone, that is Jocelyn. We're not being Zoom-bound. So we've got, we tested the market to understand the extent of the increases expected, and you can see the results in front of you. The most popular being increases of up to 10%, but this is very much up for debate, and reality will play itself out, and we'll see what those increases end up being. But we would anticipate that steep increases are probably on the horizon. We then tested the hypothetical views of respondents to understand how they would respond to such increases. Currently, the popular view is that there's no need to review specifically disability income benefits, which would be most affected by a turn in the economy. But we anticipate that there is a lag to the impact of the economic cycle on claims, and hence a lag on pricing increases. And should those increases arise, it seems that the most popular mechanism would be to change from a flat benefit structure to an income tax scale structure. Quickly moving over to investments, the last 12 years have been quite volatile. Due to various reasons ranging from the great financial crisis through to Brexit, through to the European debt crisis, through to Steinhoff, through to Nenegate, through to various aspects, and now the impact of the pandemic itself. And the future is not looking particularly predictable either. I mean, you can have a look at the kind of forthcoming attractions that we face as a market, and we can say that the future is likely to be as unpredictable and as volatile as the past was. Now, what this means is that we've got to review the status quo of investment strategies and of investment default strategies. Specifically, life stage structures would tend to be the predominant investment default, and these are made up of an accumulation type portfolio, which is invested aggressively or moderately aggressively, with a view that younger employees, and by young, we mean up until their early 50s, they're invested aggressively to try and maximize their opportunity to earn returns, and they're able to withstand the volatility because they have enough time left till retirement to make up for any potential losses. As they approach retirement, they're switched into a pre-retirement strategy, which is typically more conservative and therefore less volatile. Now that's the status quo, and this is worth re-examining, typically because it assumes that people are invested for the long term. Now, given that Stats SA indicates that the median tenure of employment is 4 years, and preservation is as a reality is an obstacle to long-term wealth creation in South Africa, we find that potentially that long-term could be as short as 4 years. And given the volatility that we've experienced as an economy and as a market and as a global market, it really raises a question as to whether or not retirement funds and employers need to revisit their investment defaults, with about 10% of consultants and 16% of funds and employers already indicating that they would do so as a result of the impact of the lockdown. We would anticipate that many of these would look towards volatility protection strategies combined with risk-profiled member choice as an optimal outcome, with a specific view of introducing smoothing or guaranteed type investments throughout the funding cycle, but especially for pre-retirees. Now, it's at this stage, just before retirement, that the majority of South Africans would have the most that they've ever accumulated in their retirement fund, and therefore the most to lose or the most to gain from significant market volatility just before they retire. Now, the issue here is that while many funds invest in a diversified balanced fund before retirement, those diversified funds are still exposed to market shocks, because when a market crash happens, the correlation between diverse categories narrows and asset categories begin to move together in the same direction. And it's because of this that we believe that an investment guarantee before retirement provides significant value, because it ensures that an individual approaching retirement can never lose money. The most that they would ever get, or the least that they'd ever earn, is a 0% return. And when you compare that to the experience of actual retirees who've had to experience the market crash, where asset values fell between 30 and 40%, that represents significant value pre as well as post-retirement. A key trend, when we asked the consultants indicate the key trends, the lowest ranking items at that stage were related to investments, and with a specific view to impact investing. Now that's changed, because when we asked everyone to indicate their views on how to rebuild the economy, we found that the use of unclaimed benefits to help the poor was the most popular option, quickly followed by impact investing and investments related to ESG alternatives and effectively South Africa Inc. And when we consider the type of impact investing that they believed was quite popular, allocating capital towards enabling decent work and economic growth was the most popular selected. So, ladies and gents, I do want to stop at this stage, and I have rushed through what is at least a 30-minute conversation. So please, I'd like to hand over to Jocelyn now, and I'd ask that should you have any questions, please do pop them into the chat box, and we will have time later on in the session to address them.
Thanks very much. Morning, everyone. It's a real privilege to be able to engage with you on this platform. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we're thinking about the future. And it's actually interesting that in 1970, a guy called Alvin Toffler authored a groundbreaking book called Future Shock. And in this book, he argued that society was undergoing an industrial revolution into a super industrial society, and that the accelerated rates of technological and social change actually leaves people disconnected and suffering from something like shattered stress and disorientation. So in other words, they feel future shocked. If we consider everything that's going on around us at the moment, maybe this is something we can all relate to. Many of the characteristics of the changes that were discussed 50 years ago are as relevant today, ranging from the disposable nature of goods, the rapid cycle of product innovation resulting in product designs which can become very quickly obsolete, through to the rise and fall of industries and professions due to disruptive technological change. In fact, the rates of change now is far greater than it was 50 years ago, and we see it accelerating into the future. In the context of our industry, we have been largely insulated from the impacts of rapid technological change, and our thesis is that the broader impacts of COVID will actually accelerate the pace of the fourth industrial revolution, not just for retirement funding, but for many players in our industry and the world at large. In our view, we are on the cusp of a digital revolution driven by the need for resilience, efficiencies, which is, I'm sure, one that most of us can relate to, connections, individualization, and an enhanced customer experience. And this is not change for the sake of change, but in pursuit of member-centric outcomes of relevance, security, continuity, value, engagement, and satisfaction. Now, I noticed on the chat string that somebody raised the concept of individualization. And so absolutely, this is a key theme that we see coming through and something we'll need to focus really hard on into the future. It's common knowledge, especially amongst the finance community, that costs are really under pressure, and rightfully so. A driver of reducing costs and providing efficiencies is the use of technology to accomplish more for members, quicker and cheaper. But this does not have to be at the expense of people. In our view, modern technology should automate the routine and empower people to add more value to other people in a manner that combines the best of technology with human connection to deliver what we're referring to as a modernized bionic experience. Examples in practice of this would include the use of robotics and AI to streamline routine admin processes, using optical character recognition to capture data, the move to paperless administration, contactless withdrawals, and again, bionic retirement benefits counselling. And not only do these examples, of which there are lots more, help reduce costs for members, but they also carry digital audit trails and unlock the capacity of consultants, as well as human resource professionals and service providers, to focus on reconnecting with members. Turning our attention once again to members, consultants ranked their top advice themes in discussions with employers and funds prior to the pandemic. The most popular, all related to members, from communication to engagement to making a bigger impact on members. High quality financial advice is a factor that has been demonstrated to have such an impact, and we therefore explored how employers and funds have instituted financial advice strategies in light of the default regulations. Interestingly, about 10% of consultants indicated that their clients did not have any advice strategy in place, and about 40% directed members to seek their own financial advice. In a context where the majority of employees do not have access to their own financial advisor, or would be of economic interest for advisors, this is the equivalent of not having a strategy in place. We applaud the 40% of funds and employers who have opted to appoint panels of vetted advisors or have implemented salaried advice. Their members are more likely to benefit in the long term from such strategies. Given the physical distancing requirements of the lockdown, it was also notable that 60% of individuals polled were comfortable to deal with their advisors remotely rather than in person. And I guess this is a great example of the seismic shift that we've seen in people becoming very comfortable to engage on digital platforms. And technological advancement therefore opens up new mechanisms to engage members at a scale through the use of Zoom, Microsoft Teams, etc., to provide advice, retirement benefits counseling, or even financial literacy training. Consultants were overwhelmingly supportive of traditional financial literacy training, as 80% indicated that it added meaningful value to members. Education is the cornerstone of being able to make informed financial decisions, and we would expect employers and funds to consider how to scale up the breadth of such training into the future, making use of the technologies available to do so. This training is relevant across all education profiles as well as across generations due to systemic low levels of financial literacy in our country. We analysed the generational split of clients administered by Sanlam and found that millennials now account for just under 50% of active contributing members, with Generation X's counting for 40%. Interestingly, we see the emergence of the Gen Zers at 2% of our membership, and we would expect this proportion to rise as more enter the workforce and the older generations exit. An interesting finding from a group of 25 to 45-year-olds is that the catalyst for their retirement savings plans was the lived experience of their own parents, who now have, or many of them, have poor retirement outcomes. Bearing in mind that the generation of retirees and this generation of retirees represents those most affected by the radical shift from defined benefit funds to defined contribution funds, and are often bearing the brunt of decisions made over the past 20 to 30 years. Their experience is impacting their children's choices, who want to do better. When questioned on how to support them, 3 issues emerged. They would like more interaction from their retirement fund than just an annual benefit statement. They feel they need help to manage debt, and they would like access to financial advice. The first request relates to implementing an individualized support system around the member, which would never have been possible at scale without enabling technology. Doing so would expand the concept of retirement benefits counselling to proactively engage and inform members of their options, values, and consequences of their decisions at critical milestones leading up to eventual withdrawal from the fund. We do find that members are often unaware of the options which have been identified by their boards of trustees and their employers. Written communication alone is ineffective and needs to be bolstered using an omni-channel spectrum of engagement mechanisms, including the intelligent use of fintech. So what do we mean by that? In a case study, we recently implemented a guided video that dynamically adjusts the content in real time to viewers based on their decisions. It's effectively a choose-your-own-adventure for retirement fund members. While this is a recent innovation, the blend of fintech with a team of human counsellors have demonstrated meaningful impact on members' lives, in that members who received counselling preserved at a rate 3 times higher than those who did not. That's a material difference. But the fourth industrial revolution provides additional opportunities to provide this kind of individualized support system to members. Over the course of the pandemic, we experienced a major market crash and had a steep increase in requests from members to switch their investment portfolios. The Sanlam Umbrella Fund elected to deploy the counsellors tactically to engage such members to inform them of the risks of switching during a market downturn. As such, affected members were fully aware of the consequences of their decisions, and only a small proportion elected to reverse their original decisions. In doing so, the fund was able to responsibly engage members through the crisis and ensured that decisions were made with a full appreciation of the potential risks and options available. What our experience revealed was that often fund members are not fully aware of all options available to them. That was the earlier point. Another application of this approach is in response to the relaxation of drawdown limitations on living annuities, where in-fund living annuitants in the Sanlam Umbrella Fund who elect to increase their drawdown rates are contacted by our counsellors to inform them of the long-term risks of changing their drawdown rates on the sustainability of their income. Given the breadth of what is labelled as counselling in the industry and the varying quality of different capabilities, we have developed the benefits counselling benchmark that stakeholders can use to evaluate the potential impact of the counselling provided. The use of technology to provide inclusive access to expertise is not limited to retirement funding, as we have seen the emergence of telemedicine through the lockdown as a means of providing access to professional healthcare whilst reducing the risk of individuals and healthcare providers. 60% of individuals polled indicated that they would be open to using telemedicine, and this application serves as another case study of the potential for technology to disrupt long-standing processes and lends itself to further iterative disruption in the healthcare space, which is becoming unaffordable to many employees given their stretched personal finances. We actually anticipate an increase in the drive to provide split risk benefits at employers so that employees have a greater choice in medical aid provision that meets their respective budgets as well as their individual needs, rather than being forced into restrictive, expensive arrangements that do not necessarily match their unique requirements. My final example relates to the use of technology to solve for the elephant in the long-term savings room, debt. There are now various providers, including Sanlam, who have implemented credit management solutions and are informing individuals of their debt status and providing mechanisms, including telephonic counselling, to better manage their spend as well as their debt. In doing so, individuals now have access to expertise and support to address an issue that still carries significant social stigma and is the leading cause of financial stress in South Africa. Whilst typically not in the scope for retirement funds, this aspect of our members' lives has a direct and material impact on their prospects to fund for retirement and affects decisions relating to contributions and preservation, and therefore cannot be ignored. Drawing inspiration from the book Future Shock, now is the time to learn, unlearn and relearn so that we can provide an ecosystem of support to people. Thank you.
Thanks, Jocelyn, and thanks, Suresh. Let me just stop this presentation so you can see us a bit bigger. I must say, from a personal perspective, I always find retirement funds and the whole topic of it usually quite heavy, because it seems like if you make a decision here, it has impact like so many years down the line, and you don't know where you'll be in your life, etc. So I feel quite confident that these things are in the hands of people that are as calm and as friendly as the two of you. We're going to jump to some of the questions, and I would really encourage everyone to also ask some questions. But I first want to have a look at the poll results. I'm going to end the poll, and it's going to be quite interesting. Can you guys all see the poll results in the chat now? It should have come up. I'm just double checking. Just let me know in the chat if the results are there. What we asked is the way your finance team views the role of retirement funds has changed, and then the options were not at all, significantly while COVID-19 lasts, or forever because of COVID-19. And it's a bit of a 30-30-30 split. Like it's 36% says not at all, 29% says significantly, but just for now, and 34% says the role of retirement funds has changed forever, which I think is quite interesting. What did you expect? Let me ask Suresh what he expected, and Jocelyn what she thinks the real answer is. Suresh, what did you expect?
A way of looking at that is that about 64% of the respondents actually believe that it has changed in some form, just differing in their views of the extent of that change. And I would agree with them. And I think that it's something we bring up at the benchmark itself. And it's the point that the impact of the lockdown has severely financially constrained many employers and will cause many aspects of our life to be re-examined commercially and personally. And as a financial services industry and with the focus on retirement funding, we've got a limited window of opportunity to demonstrate our relevance in a post-COVID world. And there are a number of ways to do so, despite the obvious structural issues or the positives that are there, such as the tax advantages of contributing to a retirement fund and the various other tax relief mechanisms that do exist. The reality is that a large number of our customers, the end members themselves, don't receive the full benefit that they could for a variety of reasons. And as an industry, we really need to step up and do our absolute best to connect with as many of those members as possible, very much aligned with that trend of individualization, so that they are inclusively brought into the fold and can actually benefit from the solutions that they actually currently have, if not also the ones that will come online into the future.
Jocelyn, how do you see the role of COVID-19? Is it in terms of bringing change? Is it like an accelerator? Is it something that has just changed our minds forever? What's your view?
So I'll answer that in two parts. I think, first of all, to answer the question, how do I think the role of retirement funds has changed, I would have expected the answers to be more in the bottom forever because of COVID-19, 90% plus. And the fact that less people are saying so is maybe a symptom of the effectiveness of communication that we do around the importance of retirement funds. The reality in South Africa is that for many people, their retirement fund is their only form of saving. And the situation that we've experienced in the last couple of months has really shone a light on that, because where people don't have other forms of saving, it's very tempting to want to tap into your retirement fund savings to almost borrow from the future to fund current expenses, which we understand is a natural dynamic. But I think with people being so under pressure over the next at least a year while economic recovery takes effect, even more reason for us to keep encouraging people who have access or the ability to save in their retirement funds as a tax-efficient way of putting money away for the future, and then using the retirement fund as an engagement platform to engage more members on an individualized basis to see how else we can actually add value to their lives as a service provider. But certainly, I think COVID has changed the world completely, and we need to really use the opportunity to bring about change for the good in our industry and to end up with a better situation where more South Africans can retire in a better off way than what they currently are able to.
Thanks, Jocelyn. And some of the questions that came in are related to things you've already spoken about, but I would just want to dive into a little bit deeper. For example, John says, should retirement funds communicate more directly with their members, circumventing employers and consultants? And it obviously speaks to the individualization that you've spoken about, but how does it work? Do at some stage members get the opportunity to choose depending on irrelevant of where they work or whoever their CFO likes to deal with? How do you see that play out?
So I'll try on this one. Yeah. We're very, very conscious of respecting the role of the employer, the board of trustees of any retirement fund, as well as the incumbent consultant to the fund and to the employer. So whatever we do as a service provider, and I can speak for Sanlam only here, is to take the employer, the consultant, and any other stakeholders along for the ride. So we would not be looking to engage directly with members with the idea of possibly selling more products to them without the blessing and endorsement of the employer, the board of trustees, and the consultant. And we also have experienced that the more, the stronger our relationship and collaboration is with an employer and a board of trustees and a consultant, not all three are always involved in the formula, the better results that we get in encouraging members to save more for the future. And, it really helps to drive the right conversations, which ultimately drive better retirement outcomes for members.
And then maybe just a follow-up question: as a CFO, let's imagine you didn't work for the product that we're talking about now, but you are a CFO, Jocelyn, of Company X. Let's call it Company X. What would your view for the next 5 years be on how you want to handle retirement funds for your employees?
I think as an employer, what we're looking at the moment is how to make sure that our investment menu, so the option of investment choices that clients can make, is relevant going into the future. Varesh mentioned in his talk about things like guaranteed funds. I'm not advocating here for guaranteed funds, but rather using them as an example where they may not currently have a place within a retirement fund's investment strategy. But with a crisis like this, it's a great opportunity to review those sorts of things. So we would be, as an employer, looking at making sure that our employees have got access to the most appropriate savings vehicles, given the risks that they face, and especially in terms of where they sit in their retirement journey with proximity to retirement. I think from a costs perspective as well, cost is always a big focus area. And from a CFO perspective, all organizations are under a lot of pressure to make sure that they are doing whatever they do as efficiently as possible without taking value away from clients, and also making sure that the quality is there in terms of what you deliver, whether you're producing T-shirts or whether you're servicing retirement funds. Protecting our clients, making sure that we're doing the right things for the right reasons. And then from a risk benefits perspective, I would be looking at how do we get the best deal for our employees. It's very tempting to want to reduce premium contribution rates, but that often comes with a reduction in benefits. So we're very mindful of that and making sure that we don't erode members' risk benefits. Whilst achieving a short-term reduction in the cost of those benefits, not wanting to take benefits away from employees. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure, Jocelyn. And I just wanted to press Varesh a little bit on this on the individualization. Nice one. Especially, I hear you, Jocelyn, saying it's all the stakeholders. We're not just going to the members, but Varesh, we know millennials are already the biggest segment of the members that pay in, and they used to do things on their app. They have all sorts of clever saving where you, with a few flicks of the thumb, you can move money from the one into the other place, and you can save in another way. So the question was there from Georgina: don't Sanlam and your competitors and colleagues become irrelevant because of this trend? And what other role can you play when that happens? What is the thinking about that on a strategic level from your side as an MD?
So that's a very good question. And I think it actually sums up a few different questions that have been raised on the chat box. It speaks to, again, the relevance of retirement funding in a world that could potentially be very different. And I think that Jocelyn made the key point, and that is across a breadth of employees, typically the only financial services proposition they have is actually through the workplace in the form of their retirement fund and either their group insurance or group savings vehicle. And therefore, the challenge is not just on how do we as a retirement funding industry compete with other consumer demands, it's how do we actually become more relevant in the consumer base that we already have. So when it comes to the trend of individualization, what that refers to is, it in fact addresses a significant challenge that we've got in the industry, in the sense that too large a proportion of actual consumers of our product, the members themselves, have no idea that they're actually consumers of our product. They don't know who their insurers are, they don't know who their administrators are, they don't know who their investment manager is, simply because of the focus of the retirement funding industry on engaging the institutions themselves, the boards of trustees or the employers, and only now, more progressively, engaging the end consumer themselves. And in doing so, you're able to build a resonance and a bit of relationship with that consumer that lends itself to other types of discussions. Now, individualization can refer to a number of different aspects of one's experience of retirement funding. Using technology as an example, being able to access your information, your fund values, various transactional mechanisms through an online portal or an app just closes the distance that would have previously existed between the individual and their retirement fund. I think for a very long time, it was commonplace that the only time you ever heard from your retirement fund as an employee is once a year when you got a retirement benefit statement in a brown envelope. But those days, unfortunately, are still here for too many employees. And what we've done as Sanlam is to abdicate that period to our distant history. I mean, the use of smartphone apps, online portals, retirement benefits counseling, all aimed at engaging individual employees to provide them with adequate information that empowers them to make appropriate decisions is the order of the day, let alone speaking to benefit and product design and how we can individualize those to provide greater optionality in a responsible manner while ensuring financial inclusion. So for us, it's a very exciting space to play in. And to your actual question as to how do we as Sanlam see ourselves being relevant in the space into the future, well, we've got all of the tools. I doubt that there's any other financial services provider in this country. In fact, there's none in the continent that is more capable of doing so than Sanlam itself, simply because we've got mature businesses that are collaborating in order to provide individuals with as robust and resilient a proposition as possible.
So you said that very nicely, Suresh. A very practical question that came in from Alan Gibbon when he registered. He says, how about the administration cost of pausing the benefit at the moment? Because obviously lots of employers have looked at that as a way of saving cash in this difficult period. There's a clear knock-on effect on what's being saved, but are there also administration costs involved, and how do you view this as something that you would see as a last resort for employers and would really advise against?
So maybe I can tackle that one very quickly. So Jocelyn has previously been the head of our administration business unit, so I'm sure she's got something to say as well. But effectively, we do
itching to go, yeah.
we do levy administration fees even when retirement funds have been suspended, simply because there are costs involved in that continuing to administer the fund itself. As to your question as to whether or not it's advisable to suspend contributions, I'd like to split that into two aspects, whether it's advisable to suspend retirement fund contributions and or whether it's advisable to suspend group risk insurance premiums, often paid out of those contributions. Now, when it comes to the contributions themselves, it is there as a mechanism for employees who are in financial distress, and they would need to demonstrate that it is almost a call of last resort. It's not the first thing the employer should do. But if it is enacted, it does provide financial relief to employees, and there is an immaterial outcome, or there's an immaterial impact on their final retirement outcome. So it's a responsible mechanism. What we don't advocate is the suspension of group risk premiums, especially during a pandemic. Having adequate insurance coverage is highly important. And again, going back to the point where for the majority of employees, the only insurance they've actually got of meaningful value is their group risk arrangement. So simply canceling that at this exact time is not advisable. Jocelyn.
I support what you've said. From an administration cost perspective, we would also look to how we can minimize that and pass on any additional costs to employers associated with pausing contributions. I think the only difficulty we run into is in the instance of a liquidation or a fund that terminates, there is a cost associated with terminating schemes, dealing with the regulators and all of that. So that would be treated differently. But in the normal course of business, we would not be charging additional fees for pausing contributions, whether it's into retirement funds or group risk premiums. And I want to really support what Suresh has said about the risk benefits. We find that employees often aren't that aware of what benefits exactly they have, but it is in these moments of truth when there's a crisis that they really need those benefits. So we would have to, in the instance where there's a choice between two, then we would definitely support the employers staying with the risk benefit rather.
Thanks, Jocelyn, and thanks, Suresh. It's been super enlightening, I think, good news for the attendees is that you'll receive and even the people who couldn't make it and registered, that the replay video is on its way in an hour. We've got access to all the report with more of the stats that Suresh has been speaking about. And obviously, if you want to get hold of Suresh or Jocelyn or both or me, you've got my email address as well. So please let me know. Yeah, so and then if the questions that were remaining, we'll also make sure we get an answer to that, especially the ones that were asked up front. We didn't get to all of them. So let me quickly go here. I'm going to make us a little bit smaller, like this. So this is what we were today. And then I also just want to get your attention for next week's CFO webinar with these three fantastic CFOs: Artie from the JSC, Ashley from the University of Cape Town, and Mark Godfrey from SPAR, who are going to talk about learning to lead in times of COVID-19. So if you're not registered yet for some odd reason, please head over to cfo.co.za/events and sign up. And the next one after that is about scenario modeling with these two gents. I see they look quite smug, but that's probably because they got it right. Because the subtitle of the webinar says, "How did Oracle and MTN got it right?" So I think that's going to be a fascinating one for everyone that's involved in scenario modeling. So yeah, once again, Suresh and Jocelyn, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining this morning. And look forward to seeing you and engaging with you all in the next time in a couple of weeks' time.
Great. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Joel.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.